My question is, where does creativity stem from, and is it a function, or I mean, what's its relation to constraints and purpose?
Creativity? Okay. The question is, where does creativity stem from, and how does it relate to the constraints of this reality? Creativity is a result of, I'd say, comes out of free will. Because you have free will to make choices, every choice. Everybody here? Okay, is this working? Yeah, okay. Every choice can express the, let's say, the creative or the evolutionary drive, okay, for things to make better sense, to be better organized. And I think in that sense of better organization comes your creativity. Creativity generally isn't something that makes things worse, or that tears things apart, or creates more entropy. A creative solution is a solution that also reduces entropy. It's a more compact, it's a more elegant solution. It's one that gets the job done more easily, more elegantly. So I think creativity comes from the basic purpose, which is to decrease entropy, and then free will, which is your ability to make those choices to do that. So I'd say creativity is kind of an innate fundamental that goes right along with the two fundamentals of evolution and the purpose of consciousness. So it's a very basic part of us.
I have a question from David.
I would like to know what you see as the role that light plays in the function and creation of different realities, and how that functions in creating those realities.
The function of life?
Light.
Light. Okay. We're going to get into a little bit of that more in the next section, but we'll touch on it here. Light in the larger reality system is a metaphor. Light's a metaphor. Okay, in the larger reality system, you have data. It's an information system. Now, when you receive some of that data, okay, you get an input. You have to interpret it. You have to work with it. And the way you do that, the way you interpret it, is with symbols and metaphors. That's the only way you can interpret it. Once you have an experience, how can you bring that experience into your awareness, which is dependent upon your history, what's in your I think of your experience data. It has to be explained in terms of your own experience. You can't explain something in terms of somebody else's experience or in terms of something that's outside of your experience. So you interpret all those things. Light is then a metaphor. So if you have, let's say, action at a distance, we have lots of metaphors when we work with the larger reality. You notice that the NDE experiences, people are always going through tunnels. Well, the tunnel's just a metaphor. They're not really going through tunnels. The larger reality doesn't have tunnels. It's just consciousness. The tunnel is a metaphor because they have a belief system that says in order to get from A to B, you have to go somewhere, you have to travel, you have to move. So the tunnel is their metaphor for being someplace other than where they were. It's their transitioning, their motion metaphor, if you will. If you're a light worker and you're healing with light, that light beam that you use is a metaphor for your intent, to focus your intent. It's a tool that you use to focus your intent so that your intent works the healing. And because we are habituated to this physical reality, it's hard for us to focus our intent unless we take these kind of physical analogs, these physical metaphors, help us do it, because we're so used to, we have to do something to have a result. Therefore, just to let your mind do the result isn't satisfying. It doesn't work. You don't focus well that way. But to have this beam of light do a result, well, then that makes sense. So it's a tool for focusing. So the light's just a metaphor, and we use light. We see beings of light. Okay, well then that's a metaphor that being has a lot of energy. There's a lot of a lot of capability there. We sense that there's a lot of data to transfer. You know, it's a being that has a lot of substance, and our metaphor for that power and that substance is light. So that's when you're in the larger reality, you don't really hear, see, touch, feel physically. You do all that. All those things are metaphors for translating what you experience into rational thoughts within this data frame. And then you have to translate it again to explain it to somebody. So that's what light is. It's just a metaphor.
So space and time also metaphors?
Yes. Yes, you'll find that people who go out of body and they'll go to this park and they say, well, I was out of body and I went to this park and I met all these neat people there and da-da-da-da-da. Well, they didn't actually go to a park. Data was exchanged between entities, and the sense and the feeling of the surroundings and the ambience and all of that got interpreted, to be the park, because it was nice and pleasant and the same kind of feelings that they get when they're in a park. So that's the thing. Yes, the same goes with all of those things. They're metaphors to explain our experiences. You have another one, Keith?
Yes. Hello. Hello. Hi, Mom. I noticed in your books a conspicuous lack of mention of dreaming, and I was curious, since I don't have any 200,000 volt capacitors, if you've ever used dreaming as some kind of a portal or entry point to the NPMR in some way.
No, I don't use dreaming. The people who do use dreaming, they're called lucid dreams, where they, in a dream, they become aware that they're dreaming, and once they become aware that they're dreaming, then they can direct the dream. That's that's another form of the out of body, except you go to sleep first and then wake up in a dream, as opposed to the out of body is a continuous awake state. But basically it ends you up in the same place, which is your consciousness is alert and in the larger reality frame. It's not trapped in the physical frame. But no, I don't use dreaming much. I find it's much easier just to go whenever you want to. It's.
How do you do that? What's your mechanism?
Well, you will, and we're going to discuss all this a little later. Your questions are all anticipating what's going to happen sooner. But the way you do that, you are consciousness, so you don't have a body to get out of in that sense. You're consciousness. You are a consciousness getting a data stream. You do that just with your conscious intent. You can eventually you let go of meditation. You let go of all those devices, those tools that you've used to learn how to get there, because you don't need them anymore. Dreaming would be probably low on my lists of ways to go, because you have to lose consciousness first. So then it's kind of problematical of how that turns out. Whereas if you're completely in control of it, then you're here, and 0.2 of a second later you're there, and then if you want to, you can be here and there. You can parallel process. So it's just a matter of shifting your focus. It's really easier than it sounds, and we're going to. Pardon?
Meditation, basically.
So basically, you learn to meditate in seconds. The meditation is just a process that allows you to get the sense of what you're doing, and so you can eventually get familiar with it and gain control of it. You can then let the meditation go too. Meditation's a tool.
Is there a key to understanding what choices we can make to enhance our consciousness or change our entropy or lower our entropy?
Yes, there is a key to those choices. Love, 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 and love. 4 choices. You have a choice. You have choices that are presented to you. Everybody does, moment by moment. All the time we have choices. We have choices, just little choices. I'm not talking about the big choices, but just the little choices that come every day. Just what you do, how you interact. It's mainly interactions with people. That's what it's about. It's not about the stuff here. It's not what we do with the stuff or how much of it we accumulate. It's about our interactions with people. Relationship gives us choices, because that's another consciousness, and you're interacting with that consciousness. And they'll do something and you'll react, and they'll react to your reaction, and you'll react to their reaction to your reaction, and so on it goes. And every one of those is a choice. And if your choices are motivated by love, by kindness, by caring, then you will lower the entropy of your consciousness. You will increase the quality of your consciousness just because you are operating in a low entropy mode. That's a low entropy mode is one that's caring and loving. That's what minimizes entropy, and it'll minimize your own entropy. If you react with anger, that's a lot of, it's very noisy. That's high entropy. So you get those choices, and that's the main key, is making every one of those little tiny choices matter. It's not saving it up for the big choices, but it's just daily life. And that brings us back to the point I made earlier. You don't have to do any of this out of body or sailing around in the non-physical. What you're here for is to experiment and to grow through your choices. You have free will. And that's really the main lesson. Everything else is extra.
I had a question in relation to your illusion about meeting in the park. Mm-hmm. And I guess you're speaking in an out-of-body state, obviously, in this case. And I wanted to sort of compare it to someone meeting in the park in this, what we consider this reality.
I'm sorry, I can't quite hear you.
I'm trying to, I wanted to sort of compare it to people meeting in the park. You were talking about out-of-body, mm-hmm. in comparison to a group of people, say, meeting in a park in this reality. Mm-hmm. And the basic difference in the functionality, because if I understand what you were saying about that first one, these people sort of made the scene to fill the social need at the time. Here we can have a meeting in the park, and we have a consensual reality. Not only we can walk out of the park, come back, and we can find the same tree there 25 years later, and the tree indeed will have seemed to have grown on its own. Now, obviously, that computer program can obviously take care of those details. Right. But since we are configuring this in relation to our own consciousness, the question is, are we involved in the growth of that tree in that 20 years and the fact that it appears to be so predictably so? And how does that compare to the meeting in the other park? And would people agree on where the tree was there, even at the time, let alone mm-hmm. coming back later?
Okay, again, that's sort of the things we're going to get into here in just a little bit. Your reality is subjective, period. This reality, we think this is objective, but it is subjective in any case. The reason that we think it's objective is because all of us have the same sensors, almost the same sensors. We all see about the same thing, so we can all agree on what we see. We all agree basically that this is a lectern, and then it's dark brown, et cetera, and what it's made of. So because we have sensors that are about the same, we think we live in an objective reality. In fact, what you see here is a little different than what other people see here. Mm-hmm. Colors are a little different. Your sense of what it is and what it's for and everything else is, they're similar, but they're a little different. That's why 5 people in an accident give 5 different accident reports, because everyone is in their own reality. So it's your reality frame, which includes a tree and your park, is subjective. It's not an objective frame, it's a subjective frame. But a lot of people will agree enough with you that it appears to be objective. Well, now you go to a less constrained reality, you see, where things don't have to, where you're not sensing like everybody else. Now you're just mind. Now, if you're just mind and you have an experience and somebody else has that similar experience, how similar is that going to be? Not very similar. It depends on how similar those minds are, how similar their experience is, how similar their beliefs are. So suddenly when you get out of this physical reality, the differences become much, much larger, because we're not all sensing with the same equipment. Now it's not sensing at all. It's how you interpret the information you get. 2 people can have that same experience, interpret it quite differently. So the meeting in the park now was only a meeting in the park for the person that interpreted that experience as a park. The other person that they met there and they were talking with may have been meeting in a classroom, or may have, been meeting at a bus stop. And one of them, there could be three of them that came there and exchanged data, and one may have been in a bus stop, one may have been in a park, and one may have been in a classroom. That's their interpretations, because it's just data, and they get to interpret that according to their own sense of what it felt like to them. So the one that felt it was leisurely and airy and nice and serene was in the park. The one that thought it was all about information and learning and da-da-da-da thought they were in a classroom. It's that sort of thing. So it's just the different nature of the two realities. Because this is such a constricted reality, we think that it's objective. It's not really. It's just that the subjectivity is small around the stuff, like the tree. But the subjective here also gets big around the relationships. Once we start interacting with people, which is really what we're supposed to be doing here, and learning, suddenly the subjective nature gets to be almost as big as it is in a non-physical, because that's no longer do we all see the same thing. Even the men are from Mars and the women are from Venus sort of thing. That's a big dichotomy, but even among any two individuals, how you interpret that interaction has a lot to do with your own experience and is not common.
So you're saying this constraining rule set for each of those environments are essentially why we can have that perception there and not have such variability in perception here. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, right. It's just the rule set that makes the difference. One's more constrained than the other. Right.
One more question. In a binary system of ones and zeros, how and why does a -1 come into existence, and especially in relation to like an energetic conceptual sine wave?
Well, explain to me how the -1 comes in. I mean, what do you mean by -1?
Sine wave, you've got 0 plus 1, it comes down to -1.
Yeah.
If based on binary, you've got ones and zeros, where does the -1 come into existence, and how?
Well, you don't necessarily have to have a sine wave. You can have a rectified sine wave, or you can have a sine squared wave. There's not a necessity for it to be alternating. It can be a ramp, run from 1 up to from down to 0 and up to 1. That's not the point. The point is that you just have change. It's off, on, yes, no, 1 0. The sinusoid doesn't have to. The sinusoid's just a device, if you will. It's a real handy device, mathematical device, and a device in which you can it's a logical. You can even think of the sinusoid as a logical device, but it's not. It's a descriptor. It's not fundamental.